Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
It is a Thursday, and all of our guests today, including Thomas Drance, are sponsored by Bassan Motors. Check out their Canada Day sale all July long. The script is... Okay, we'll talk in the break. Get $3,000 for scrap car trade-ins, pay no GST, and get a TV with every new financed vehicle. Did you write this? Because it smells of your tweet the other day.
Horrible tweet the other day.
We'll talk to the people at Bassan. We'll work it out. Learn more at basantmotors.com.
I did write it, actually.
What a shock. It's wrong.
Never mind. What's wrong with it?
Because you never put commas and periods in. That's
I did.
No,
you just Donnie doesn't know how to read. That's the problem.
Okay, you've got to read this, so we'll do that after.
It's very hard.
But for one thing, it's my fault. I didn't pre-read it.
See?
Okay,
so there you go. So right there, it's all on you. All the blame.
Just so you know, day isn't spelled S-A-Y.
Ooh. Oh, my bad. Okay, so that is a typo. But
it is with a D. It
threw me off. Professionals like Thomas Drance, they adapt in that situation.
Speaking of professionals, there you go. From the Athletic NHL Draft going at 4 Pacific, Thomas Drance. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Of course, if it had been written by Rick, it would have been written in pure phonetics. Just phonetics.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And I still would have screwed it up. Thomas, further to McLean versus Luongo, if you don't mind, we go down that debate route again.
Sure.
Just kidding. JT Miller, what do you believe when it comes to JT Miller and the Canucks?
Well, it's as of Wednesday afternoon, and I haven't managed to circle back just yet this morning, it was quiet. You know, it's been quiet around JT, and that's not to say that there's not discussions. That's not to say that the Canucks aren't working the phones. But the sense I got Wednesday afternoon was that the momentum that might bring a deal about before the draft or on the draft floor was kind of absent. Like things would have needed to change from where we were at last night to bring about a Miller resolution today, one way or the other. We know they're far apart in contract talks. We know that the Canucks stepped up their offer this week. That speaks to the urgency that the club feels here. There is an understanding that the club will take on additional risk if they hold Miller beyond the NHL's traditional silly season. Obviously, all of that said, we know that Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin aren't going to flinch here. We know that they're willing to be patient if their ask isn't met. And while I think there's been some inquiries, I don't think we're at the point where they're close to a deal. I don't know that we're going to get to a point where they're close to a deal. And I don't think we're at a point where the ask is close enough to being met that anybody's discussing what an extension could look like with JT Miller's agent, which tells me that stasis is a very much a possibility as we head into the first big date on the NHL silly season this evening in Montreal.
You are in Montreal. Were you partying last night?
Yeah, it
sounds like your voice is pretty rough there.
It's been a couple days of that. I actually didn't go that hard last night. I've been crushing green teas and halls. So it goes. I've only got 4 hours of broadcasting to do, boys. I'll be fine.
We should talk. Look what we went through last week. Oh, yeah. Can you see a scenario, Thomas, and you alluded to this or hinted at this, a scenario, trade deadline next season, Canucks contending, not in a playoff spot, maybe getting an offer for JT Miller and Francesco saying, well, hold on a second. We get some playoff dates here. I need some playoff revenue. We can't trade him. Can you see that scenario? Which wouldn't be a good one, by the way.
Yeah, it's not hard to see, to be honest with you. The apocalyptic picture you just painted concerns me deeply. It would concern me deeply were I in Jim Rutherford or Patrick Allvin's shoes, but I'm not, so that's not my stress. Without question, if JT Miller is on the books as the deadline approaches and there's no extension in hand, the club's going to start, there's going to be a significant sense of tension around this management group. for a lot of reasons. I do think the club needs to be proactive in resolving this situation. And yet, it's not me advocating for them to cave and just take the best offer. I do think they have to be careful about getting this right. If they're holding him beyond the draft, they think something could change in the days ahead, clearly. It's not a deadline, obviously. The club's made that clear. But there is a lot of risk that you take on if you hold him. Again, you have more than today. But beyond the 14th, 15th, I do think you start to paint yourself into a corner a little bit. And certainly by the deadline, where a lot of teams have cap issues, the deals get that much more complicated. You're more likely to be dealing with a rental player as opposed to dealing a player that teams might view as a potential core piece. There's also the injury risk. I mean, I hate everything about the scenario you just outlined.
Thomas, 15th overall pick. When I look at the cupboards in Abbotsford, I don't see a young centerman. I don't see a young defenseman after Rathbone. A lot of forwards are being linked to the Canucks for this draft. Which way do you see them going at 15 overall?
We'll see how the draft board plays out, because that's the big question mark in Montreal today, Rick. The amount of divergence outside of the top five, and honestly, even within it, is through the roof, like nothing we've ever seen before. There's players that some teams are going to have in their top five that are going in the teens in public mock drafts. It is an absolute Wild West draft class, and that's true usually after pick 25. This year it's true after pick 5. And so for the Canucks at 15, there's a risk-reward dynamic going on, right? In a draft that's this uncertain, there's a real possibility that a player could drop, right? That a player they really like could drop. My intel is, in terms of who Canucks brass will be crossing their fingers, hoping to see available at the 15th overall pick, you've got the big centerman in Marco Kasper, and you've got the big shooter in Jonathan Lecker-Mackey. Those are sort of the two names that I'm hearing, fingers might be crossed on the draft floor about. There's also a couple players that the Canucks have been linked with repeatedly. Leon Bichel is a Swedish defender, played for Leksands, which is Alvin's old SHL club team, right? So it's easy to draw the line from Alvin to Bichel. And then Nathan Gaucher, the big QMJHL centerman. I think those guys are ranked too low on the Canucks list. It's likely that better players, or players that they rank higher anyway, will be available when the 15th overall pick comes up. So I'm not expecting those two names. The sweet spot guys for me seem to be Ögren and Östlund. Östlund being the centerman. Some industry chatter that the club's a little bit higher on Östlund than Ögren, but I don't know if I believe that. I think Ögren's got the better overall offensive profile. I wonder if, when push comes to shove, the club might value that upside. So we'll sort of see exactly how that shakes out. But those are sort of the two guys I'm watching. And then I can't shake, Rick, and I know you're hearing the same.
Yeah.
The Canucks' interest in the defenseman, Pavel Mintyukov.
Big time.
I've been dubious about that. I know you've been a little more gung-ho, thinking that he's a big priority for them than I have been. But I can't shake that, the club does seem to be linked to him by just about everyone I talk to, despite the fact that my sense would be to favor one of those two Swedish forwards.
Yeah, they do love Pavel in Ontario, the OHL, but he's going to be gone before 15, no question. Yeah, I got to ask you about Bo Horvat. Lots of chatter about an extension this summer. Do you see his extension, the money starting with a 7, Thomas?
I do. I mean, you look at the comparables, and I know people would love to throw some super team-friendly deals like Gabriel Landeskog and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins into the mix, but I kind of look at the logic of the Tomas Hertl deal and the Sean Couturier deal. That's 7.75 in Couturier's case, 8.1 plus for Hertl. And I sort of see those as pegs that, leave the Horvat camp standing on pretty firm ground. Like for me, if you do a $7.5 million deal that doesn't have max term on it, I think that represents a pretty significant long-term commitment from the club to the player, and I think the player would be giving the club a bit of a break, particularly because, gentlemen, I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things with the valuation for centerman just in the next week, right? I mean, excuse me, we're going to have Trocheck sign. We're going to have Kopp sign. We're going to have Kadri sign. Like, let's see what the market looks like on the other side of that. But, I think by the time the Horvat deal is in fact papered and executed, and I'm definitely expecting that to happen this summer, I'm thinking a $7.5 million valuation is probably going to look pretty team friendly here.
Thomas, first time we've had you on since last week. Your opinion of the Brock Boeser 3-year deal?
It's one of those where it was the best outcome among a set of bad outcomes, right? I mean, I like the compromise deal. I think from a Canucks perspective, it allows them to manage his value, right? The moment Boeser put his autograph on that contract, his trade value was higher and the club had certainty. So they basically created value out of a hat. That's far better than the arbitration route or the qualifying offer route or a trading him at a low ebb of his value. Like, this was a way to just suddenly create value for your team if you could reach that compromise the way that the Canucks and Boeser's camp were able to. Credit to them both. And as for Boeser, he guarantees himself almost $20 million as opposed to having a $7.5 million qualifying offer and sort of taking the risk that, he can outperform that or that he stays healthy. So I think I like the deal for both sides. I just also think you have to recognize that the club boxed themselves into a corner 3 years ago with the original bridge deal and the structure of it. And as a result, Boeser was positioned far from optimally from a Canucks perspective. And so this is a good contract. I think there's a good chance that Boeser lives up to it, but it's not a particularly efficient one from the team's perspective. And if Boeser does hit on this deal, he's going to be poised to be a very, very desirable, very young, unrestricted free agent at the age of 28. So it doesn't really give the team security, nor does it give them efficiency. It just is better than any of the options on the table from a team perspective, which really highlights how important it is to manage those second contracts far better than the club typically has, right? I mean, you look at the Horvat payoff, right? In contrast with the litany of second contracts that haven't gone the Canucks' way, that, cost them players like Stetcher and Ben Hutton and box them into a corner with Boeser, right? You cannot ignore how important it is to get those second contracts right, whether they're bridge deals or long-term deals. It's about having a really good sense of the player, valuing them conservatively, and setting yourselves up to keep the player and benefit from that structure, something the Canucks really struggled to do in the last regime. And gentlemen, I'm worried that there's still another deal on this team's books that's going to have a similar tricky effect on the club. And of course, that's the bridge contract that number 40, Elias Pettersson, signed last fall.
Yeah, which will be done before we know it. Take care of yourself. Take care of that voice, Thomas. Rick has a solution. We all know about it here in Canada. It's called Buckley's.
Buckley's.
Right? Yeah.
Buckley's. I'm taking some Buckley's right now, Thomas.
You had some Buckley's last night.
This morning I took some. If you want, I can send it to Montreal.
You got the halls.
Got
the old school halls going.
Fisherman.
I'm going Alain Vigneault style.
Yeah.
There you go, boys.
Now all you have to do is start yelling in a high-pitched voice, and it'll be perfect. You'll have your AV down pat. I don't know if anybody can do that.
I promise you, if I start yelling, it's going to be squeaky.
Yeah. We know that.
Thomas, get to work. Appreciate it. No, it's a busy day. Thanks so much for joining us.
See you, boys. Thanks for having me.
Thomas Drance, sore throat or not, scratchy throat or not, always solid.
And playing hurt for us. But Donnie, he's on the floor in Montreal tonight. The NHL draft. The Canucks have the 15th overall pick. Could be a big day or it could be quiet. Time will tell.
Yes, they do have the 15th pick, and it could be a big day.
With JT, Donnie, it could if they blow it out of the water with the trade. But don't be surprised if it's quiet.
Okay, we are running throughout the show today famous and infamous moments from Canucks drafts gone by. As we go to break, and the poll question is next, As we go to break, let's go back to 2009, also in Montreal. This was, and I believe he was in the middle of contract negotiations. I think I've got this right. But the Canucks let their captain make the draft announcement. That didn't go all that well, and as it turned out, neither did the draft pick. Donnie and Dolly, the team, on check.
The Vancouver Canucks are proud to select from the University of Minnesota, center Jordan Schroeder.
He'll be teammates with him soon. His name's Jordan Schroeder.